Hello.
Hello, hello. Yeah,
How are you doing?
welcome, Dr. Alexander. It's an honor for us to meet you.
Well,
Hello.
it's an honor to meet you too. Thanks for having me on. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I'm a fan of your books, and I'm therefore very pleased that we have win you here for Pantheism TV. But first question, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing very well, thanks. Just kind of getting things done here, getting over our first snowstorm and hoping
Oh,
for a few others and doing quite well.
yeah, that is good. That is good. Now at the beginning, let's introduce ourselves. First, me, I'm Torge Meyer, 31 years old, and I come from northern Germany near Hamburg. Do you know Hamburg?
Hamburg.
I do.
Hamburg.
I know of Hamburg. I've not visited there. I've been to Würzburg and Heidelberg and several
Ah,
other places, but
mm,
So you
not
have been in
all.
Germany already.
Yeah, I was there in 1976 in particular. I was backpacking with a friend and really enjoyed Germany. What a great place. I've been back a few times since for work, to Berlin, to
To the book fairs.
yeah, to that kind of thing, and also just to medical conferences, things like that,
Yeah.
like neurosurgical conferences.
yeah.
So, also me, I'm Martin Sagel.
Hello,
Uh,
Martin.
I'm 48 years old, and my normal job is a real estate agent for 28 years now.
Uh-huh.
And I have some other hobbies, some with payment, some without payment, and one is also a book, which is called All is One. And the coming weeks, I wait for the English translation. It's,
Good. I
it's
like the sound of that. That's right up our alley. I don't know if you're familiar with our book, Living in a Mindful Universe,
Yeah.
yeah,
but that book leans very heavily into idealism and to kind of oneness of mind that we share. So all is one indeed.
First, to us, we are a globally networked association of pantheists, and we found the League of Pantheists over 5 years ago. We spend a lot of time on the internet, but we also have summer festivals, lectures, or regular meetings. Um, And we would like to make the idea of pantheism more popular, but we
Right.
want also bring people together and ensure uh, more peace in the world. Yeah.
Right.
And first question, do you know the word and the meaning of pantheism?
Well, my understanding of it is that it simply means that all kind of notions of God are really of one God form. And we may name it many different things, but that doesn't mean we're talking about different entities. We're actually all referring to a force of love, compassion, kindness, acceptance, mercy. That's kind of a creative principle at the core of the universe. That's been my understanding of uh, pantheism, and I think it certainly aligns beautifully with much of what we try and teach about my lessons from my journey and the scientific revolution in consciousness.
Mm.
yeah, that's right. Mhm. Yeah, for us, also God is not a personal external God. It's not a person like a human being. It's
Right.
we are inside God, all of us.
Correct. Yes. I would say that's really kind of the philosophical position that we would promote. The closest thing, if you've got to define it, would be evolutionary panentheism, but it's this notion of God being within all elements of the universe. And I would say that our very conscious awareness for each and every human being is directly sourced in that force of benevolence at the core of the universe. So we're never separate from it at all.
And
Mm.
that is why we contacted you because you said something like that in your interviews and in your book also. Or, you talked about that you had a feeling like that, that all is one, that we are inside God. Or so
Right.
maybe you can explain a little bit from your your personal.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that. I think it's important to point out, I was a neurosurgeon before. I was trained in the classical, conventional science of the mid and late 20th century, which was all about materialism and physicalism. The notion that only the physical world exists, and therefore the brain must somehow be mustering consciousness out of pure physical matter. But of course, nobody understood how that could happen. And the fact is, because that's not what's happening. What's actually happening is the brain is serving as a reducing valve or filter that allows a little eddy current of that primordial God mind to be our awareness, but it's never isolated. And especially when we leave the brain and body, we tend to blend right back into that beautiful ocean of love and connection and kindness. But there is a certain preservation of what I would call a soul line between lives. And this is something that was revealed to me in my NDE. It was crystal clear the brain was not the creator of consciousness. That's why the medical case report on my medical records is so important, because they went much further than I did in the book Proof of Heaven to make the case that my brain could not have harbored any kind of dream or hallucination. The objective evidence was too strong. And therefore, where did this extraordinary, multiply detailed and transformational set of events that I witnessed, how did that all happen? And so it really showed me about that primacy of mind. And I've spent the last 15 years since my coma, and the coma, of course, is what I wrote about in the book Proof of Heaven. There's now a 10th anniversary book, Proof of Heaven, that has 36 additional pages. So it covers a lot of what's happened since that time. But a lot of what's happened has involved work with other scientists around the world. And there's an evolving kind of paradigm shift in the scientific community about the brain-mind connection that is leading us towards this one mind hypothesis, this primordial mind notion of that God mind as being what exists. And then how it all comes out into our individual conscious awareness is kind of a mystery right now. But the reality is it's become crystal clear that the brain is not the creator of consciousness. The consciousness is much more unified and universal. And in fact, when you dive deep into it, what you find is it's not some neutral environment, but it's all about love. I mean, that's what near-death experiencers have been telling us for thousands of years. And many of them might have started as an atheist or an agnostic, but after having had a near-death experience, more than 90% of those people come back believing in a loving force, of a God force at the core of the universe. And what I recognized from my own journey was it doesn't matter if you want to try and call that force God or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit. I mean, there are many names we can apply, but they're just fooling us into believing that we're talking about something different. And it's always about that love. You could say that the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, is written into the very fabric of the universe through the whole process of what are called life reviews. Life reviews occur in more than 50% of people who have near-death experiences. And the life review, interestingly enough, is more like a reliving of the events, not just a remembering. And also, it's from the perspective of everybody involved, which means if you were busy handing out a lot of pain and suffering to other people during your lifetime, in your life review, you're on the receiving end of that. And it's not very comfortable. And I think, in fact, that's where many of our ideas of hell have come from, because in my NDE, there was no way that you would have an eternal kind of hell or damnation. But the science behind it all is really emerging with looking at the brain as this filtering mechanism or transceiver for that primordial mind. But ultimately, it's all really about the fact that we're all in this together, and that one mind, to hurt another is to hurt oneself. And that one mind is who we all are. We're sharing the mind of the universe. And that, I think, is where the science is going on this. And it certainly can help guide religions towards kind of a unifying kind of platform of understanding, where it's really all about a completely inclusive love, kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance, taking care of the least, the last, of the lost, and really being here to care for each other and care for our planet. Because, of course, animals are also included in this great spiritual world that we're talking about, we're connected with all of them. And that's why we need to take a more kind of holistic approach to our life and not be so demanding of ripping out resources from, a very finite and limited earth that we live with. So it's really, I would say, the whole near-death experience community, the science of consciousness, as it's currently evolving, is all about this oneness of mind and how we're all really part of one consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eben.
It's very interesting.
Before your near-death experience, you used to be an atheist and believe in a material worldview, right?
Well, I had spent my life, my father was very influential, and he was a globally renowned neurosurgeon, very scientific, but he also was very kind of deeply spiritual. He prayed, he used prayer in his work as a neurosurgeon for healing. He fully believed in a loving personal God and every bit of that. So I struggled in my own life. And then through my career, I found it more and more challenging to understand how conscious awareness could survive the death of the brain and body. I really was looking for answers. And that's what happened in the form of my near-death experience. I came to a beautiful kind of personal realization through an extraordinary illness that's really a perfect model for human death. And yet I came through it all with this extraordinary spiritual awakening. And not only that, over 2 months, I had a full recovery of memories and of my function. In fact, my memories were more complete after that 2 months of recovery post-coma than they had been before the coma. So it's another kind of showing us the brain is not the repository of memories. So kind of the last nail in the coffin of materialist neuroscience, but it's a fact. Our memories are stored, in a different way in the universe, but not in the molecular patterns in our brains. The brain plays a role in encoding all this, but long-term memory is not stored in the brain. And that's a huge part of this argument for eternity of soul and for these extraordinary human experiences.
Yeah, great. For viewers who don't know your books, could you briefly explain how the near-death experience came about and what you saw?
Right. Very briefly, I went into coma very suddenly, November 10th, 2008, early in the morning. Severe headache, back pain, soon was grand mal seizures and lapsing into coma. There is a misperception in the lay press out there that it was a medically induced coma. It was not. It was the coma was caused by the meningoencephalitis. In fact, I went into coma on no sedation at all, and I came out of coma on heavy sedation. So don't pretend that this was, a medically induced coma. It was something far richer than that. And that's why the medical profession pays so much attention to my story, is because I should have had no ability for any dream or hallucination given the objective damage to my brain. And yet I had this extraordinary experience. Again, to try and be brief, because there's a lot to it, but I was amnesic. That's another very important thing to point out, because pretty much you never hear about that in a near-death experience. I don't, initially I didn't know why I was amnesic, but I figured out that for me to have a buy-in to the reality of the journey demanded that amnesia, and that's become clear over the years. But anyway, in that setting of amnesia, it started in what I call the earthworm eye view, a primitive, coarse, unresponsive realm. And I was rescued from that by the slowly spinning white light that came with a perfect musical melody, ushered me up into what I call the Gateway Valley. It's kind of like Plato's world of ideals, but for the individual soul. There was no death or decay. This would be the realm where people would go through life reviews, but given my amnesia, I did not have an Eben Alexander life review, but I did see life reviews and reincarnation in two very powerful visions as this whole thing progressed. So in that Gateway Valley, I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing, millions of other butterflies looping and spiraling in vast formations, colors beyond the rainbow. There were thousands of beings dancing in the meadow down below, and just a really beautiful scene. I mean, and it was all being fueled, all this joy and festivity. Up above were angelic choirs emanating chants, anthems, hymns. They would thunder through my awareness, and they were empowering this incredible scene going on below. And beside me on the butterfly wing was a companion, a spiritual guide, a guardian angel, sparkling blue eyes, high forehead, broad cheeks, and broad smile. She never said a word to me. She never had to. but her message was delivered telepathically. And the message was very simple. And I think it was my main message to this world to bring back from this experience. Her message to me was, you are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You're richly cared for. And I cannot tell you how reassuring and comforting that was at that time. I also saw at this, around this point in the journey, what I call the divine wind, or the breath of God. It was a soft summer breeze that blew through and changed my experience completely, even though the elements stayed the same by description. My feeling of the power of that loving personal God force at the core of the universe was all through this experience now because of that summer breeze. And then what happened was the angelic choirs above provided yet another musical portal. And I remember seeing all four-dimensional space-time collapsing down, all of the spiritual realm with deep time. Note that in the life review, you can have birth, death, everything in between simultaneously. That's one of the reasons these journeys are so hard to describe, is you're in an eternal realm completely out of earthly time flow. But I saw all of that collapsing down. And that's when I ascended through yet another light portal from these angelic choirs. And that's what took me up into the core. Complete resolution of all dualities, masculine, feminine, good and evil, darkness and light, every bit of it resolved into oneness. In fact, I refer to it often as a dazzling darkness. It's kind of where all paradoxes are resolved, this oneness. And that's where I recognized that my very conscious awareness was sourced in that God force at the core, the creative core of the universe. Now, I would tumble back down from that realm. There's much more to this trip. I won't go into it in detail now, but I would cycle through these realms and learn that by using the musical notes of the melody, that's what allowed me to traverse these various spiritual realms. There came a time when, as they told me, and initially entering the core, you're not here to stay, you'll be going back. We'll teach you many things. But there did come a time when I could no longer conjure up the melody that took me up into that beautiful Gateway Valley. To say I was sad at that point would be an understatement, but I also knew I could trust that I would be taken care of. And it's at that point that I saw the thousands of beings going off into the distance, heads bowed, some holding candles, and this praying, kind of murmuring energy coming from them, surprising to me because it was very comforting. Like spiritual home, just like I'd first felt in the Gateway Valley in the core realm when I first passed through them. But now I was feeling it way down in that earthworm eye view. And not only that, it seemed to be guiding me somewhere. And then there were 6 faces that appeared. They would come out of the muck, say a few words, and disappear. And it turns out that those 6 faces were very important. They were what we call veridical time anchors. And they were people who were physically present in the ICU room the last 24 hours I was in coma. So it basically helped me to conclude that the vast majority of my coma journey happened between days 1 and 5 of the coma. And all that timing is explained in the book, Proof of Heaven. But anyway, it was really the last of those faces that got my attention. It was a 10-year-old boy. It turns out this is back on Earth. This is Sunday morning, day 7 of coma. And they told my youngest son, Bond, all through the week that, daddy's sick, blah, blah, blah. But on that Sunday morning, day 7 of coma, they held a family conference and said I'd started the week with a 10% chance of survival. Now it's down to 2% chance of survival, but with no chance of recovery. So the doctors recommended stopping antibiotics, taking me off the ventilator, and just letting me go. And Bond knew that was bad news. He came running down the hallway, pulled open my eyelids, one eye looking over there, one eye over there, neither pupil working. Anybody in medicine knows that's a horrible scene. But the reality is, I was coming back to this world. He was pleading with me, Daddy, you're going to be okay. Daddy, you're going to be okay, as if somehow that would make it so. And although I promise you, I didn't see him with my eyes, hear him with my ears, I was way too far gone from this body in the process of dying. But now everything mattered, and I had to come back. And that's what compelled me to come back, was my sense of responsibility to another soul, even though I didn't recognize him at the time. So I start waking up, fighting the ventilator. They pulled out the breathing tube. I said, thank you. And I don't remember that. I don't remember, in fact, the next 36 hours or so, very vague for me. But interestingly enough, all the memories from deep coma, that's what I knew when I woke up. It was my only reality. I still had amnesia for Eben Alexander's life, but those memories then started coming back very quickly. And over the next 36 hours, I had a paranoid delusional psychotic nightmare that seemed a little more real than normal things, but certainly nowhere near the reality of the deep coma journey. And the memories from the deep coma journey, from the spiritual part of the journey, when my brain was so disabled, those memories are as sharp and clear today as if the whole thing happened yesterday. Whereas the memories from that 36-hour paranoid delusional psychotic nightmare after waking up from coma, but still with the brain very affected by the bacterial infection, those memories faded within a few weeks. So I'm glad I was writing everything down. It took 2 months for memories to come back. And when they came back, they were more complete than they had been before. And I've spent the 15 years since all of that working with other scientists and other experiencers around the world to come up with a better idea of the notion of reality, the nature of the mind-brain connection, and really to explain consciousness much more fully. So that's really the kind of nuts and bolts of my experience, and I'd like to entertain any questions or comments you might have.
And you talked about all is one. That's what we believe in pantheism. This is true. This is the truth. All is one.
Well, that is exactly what I experienced deep in that core realm. Was that it was all about that one God force being the very source of our conscious awareness. So in other words, there's no way we could ever be separate from that. Although in our world, there's a lot of apparent darkness and evil, but a lot of that is kind of ego, toxicity, and narcissism and those kinds of things. But ultimately, we all have these connections with each other that are broadly demonstrated in the dying experience. So either near-death experiences, which happen in about 20% of, say, cardiac arrest patients, and there are other forms of kind of miraculous healing that can occur in this kind of setting. But the near-death experience, you have shared death experiences, which are just like near-death, but happen in perfectly healthy people, where a soul could be 1,000 miles away, and then when the mother is dying, her soul comes through, grabs the son's soul, takes it on a journey, witnessing her life review, and then coming back to this world. That's called a shared death experience. And they're not as common as near death, but there are a lot of them out there. And then, of course, when you realize that, for example, the work of Christopher Kerr, he's a hospice worker in Buffalo, New York, and he recently wrote a book called Death is But a Dream. But in that book, you realize he doesn't care about near-death experiences or anything of that ilk. What he cares about is people who are actually dying. And what you find is they go through the very same things that are described in near-death experiences. Souls of departed loved ones coming to escort them over in a very real fashion. It's not imaginary. It's not a hallucination. It's a real part of our ongoing kind of soul connection. But it's all about that one mind, because the dying process shows us that in our mental space, we have access to the entire universe, to all fellow beings, to those who have left the physical plane, those who are still there. We have a very broad access through this kind of one mind that becomes more apparent to us in around that transition we call death.
Eben, how can you explain it to people which are skeptical, who ask you, maybe it was just that in the coma your brain worked already again and it's just like a dream or something? How can you answer it, explain that it's true, that it's a different world or a different dimension where we be?
Well, mainly as the case report doctors made clear in their case report, my brain was in no shape to have any kind of dream or hallucination. Those parts of my neocortex were wrecked. So there was no way that there was going to be a hallucination coming out of that brain. That's really kind of the important part of my case for the scientific community, is you've got this extraordinary experience and you've got these 7 days when it might have occurred, and all the evidence showed that it happened really between days 1 and 4, 1 and 5 of that experience. And all the medical parameters, the neurologic exams, absent oculocardiac reflex, Glasgow coma scales of 6 or 7, probably as low as 5. And the Glasgow coma scale, just for reference, in you or me would be 15. Any score below 9 is deep coma. So that entire week, I was mainly 6 or 7, sometimes as low as a 5. I did get credit in the case report for an 11 in the emergency room, but that's only because I cried out, God help me. And by saying those words, I automatically got a much higher Glasgow Coma Scale score. But I have no memory of saying that at all. I was long gone from this world when those words were uttered. So at any rate, but all of that just makes clear from a neuroscientific perspective that my experience could not have happened. It was impossible. That's why you see, occasionally there's an attack against me that's an ad hominem attack. It's trying to take down my credibility because the story itself, from a scientific perspective, is pretty much bulletproof. There's no way to get around the fact that I had this extraordinary experience. And then, of course, the other key thing that the doctors who wrote the case report make clear, they were challenged by the doctors, the peer review editors of the scientific journal. How do you explain this? This case is unprecedented in the medical literature. And the three doctors who wrote it said it's because he had a near-death experience. That's why he had such profound healing. And they knew of other cases like Anita Morjani, who's stage 4B lymphoma. She was within 12 hours of death, and her lymphoma disappeared after she had a profound near-death experience. Or Dr. Mary C. Neal. She wrote a book called To Heaven and Back. She had a profound near-death experience while kayaking in Chile in the late 1990s. In a kayaking accident, her legs and kayak jammed under boulders underwater, broke her legs. She was underwater more than 30 minutes. Ask any physician about how your brain's going to be doing after a 30-minute warm water drowning, and you'll find, not. She was brought to the surface dead. They resuscitated her. She ended up making a miraculous, complete recovery. And of course, she's gone around like I have talking about the spiritual experience, but that's really the deeper lesson for all of us, is coming into wholeness and healing involves love, kindness, compassion, mercy for self and others. And all of that is writ large in this beautiful kind of one mind hypothesis that's coming out of these experiences.
Mm-hmm. Then I saw one video. There is a Russian, and he said that he had the same experience like you, but he said, everything he saw, he said it's from the Bible. It's Christian, and Jesus, he meet Jesus, whatever, angels, whatever. But you say it's not like that. That is a proof for Christianity. Christianity is just a proof for God is everywhere, or we are.
Well, what I would say is that the content of a near-death experience is kind of universal and independent. The interpretation that somebody comes back with, they might use language that reflects a lot of their prior religious beliefs. Okay, yeah. So the prior religious beliefs can influence the telling of the story and kind of the interpretation, but the actual content is something that's beyond that. And you find when you study these across cultures, as Gregory Shushan has, for example, you find a tremendous number of similarities. And the similarities are especially that loved ones who have passed over come to welcome the soul over, and also going from darkness into light, and also the sense of traveling to a different realm. I mean, those are very common features of the NDE that I think come through. And as far as the linkage to Christianity, I would say the problem is Christianity, just like so many other religions, has been heavily kind of influenced and corrupted by human beings with, different motives, different kind of agendas. And so the original message of the prophets in many ways has been lost. But this is where I would say there's a book by a friend of mine, Robert Kopp, Coppes. The book is called The Essence of Religions. Now, he knows a lot about near-death experiences, and he uses near-death experiences as the gold standard. In other words, what religion should be. It's exactly the lessons that are pointed out by near-death experiences. That should be no surprise that people who almost die and have these extraordinary things that prove to them the reality of God and this kind of heavenly realm. And it's
the original source before they made a culture out of it.
Right. And the problem is there's also reincarnation. I mean, you cannot talk about any of this without admitting that the scientific evidence for reincarnation is very strong. It's really not even disputable. Go to uvadops.org. Division of Perceptual Studies, University of Virginia, you'll find they've studied more than 2,700 cases of past life memories in children of suggestive reincarnation over 6 decades. And of those, 1,700 are called solved. That is, they actually found the person who lived before. So our souls do come back again and again. There is something called programmed forgetting. That's what I call it, which means that you must harvest those memories from the children by age 6 or 7, because natural processes cover them over, so that most of us by our teen years or early adult years don't really have memories of past lives or between lives. They were there in our early childhood, but then they were part of the amnesia of childhood. They got lost as we grew past that age of reason at age 6 or 7, where language starts to take over a lot of our kind of memory functions and kind of cognitive functions. So
you are sure now that we come many times?
Well, yeah, I say the evidence is overwhelming. And again, important to point out, programmed forgetting is a very real process. For example, if you read the story of James Leininger, the book is called Soul Survivor, and Bruce and Andrea Leininger, his parents, wrote the book. Anyway, he's a World War II fighter pilot who was reincarnated in April of 1998. It's a very compelling story. But even he, after age 7 or 8, didn't have those memories any longer. Even though he'd made a big deal of it before, the memories were discussed, they were written about, they were studied. But as he grew older, those memories faded. And most of us don't have those memories. I think so we have skin in the game. We have some buy-in to this existence, which I think must be necessary, at least at this point in human evolution and our understanding. But ultimately, it's really about sharing that one mind and how we're all in this together.
Okay, yeah, it's very interesting. Do you know also Neale Donald Walsch and his books? Did you read it?
I haven't read his books in any kind of detail, but I am familiar with him and kind of his conversations with God. I think he's done a great job to bring a lot of reason back to our kind of understanding of God and theism and all of that. I think he's done a good job of that.
Do you think that your experience is a proof of his words?
Does it prove? I don't know his words well enough to say whether or not my story is proof of his words, but there's certainly, of a God force that is there, very real, and that is here really to kind of protect and love us. And it's really because of loving. I often call it the love of the Creator, the Creator's love for the creation. But we're all co-creating. We have free will. I would not want anyone to think that my journey showed that there was a lot of predeterminism, even though I think there are some things that we determine. I think there's some agreements we make. I think, in fact, our higher souls plan out hardships and difficulties. And those are kind of the gifts, because they are what mark our pathway forward and allow us to grow and transform as souls. Is to have that kind of larger vision. And it's always about the higher good and helping others.
And we had Neale Donald Walsch several times here on Pantheism TV. His most important message is all is one. And
well, I would say that very much is in alignment with the emerging reality and the science of consciousness, that it really is about one mind. There was a recent contest on the best scientific evidence for continuation of consciousness after permanent bodily death, and all 28 of the winning essays in that contest are available to the reading public for free. I would urge your audience to go review them. They are available at bigelowinstitute.org. And the first place winning essay by Jeffrey Mishlove is mind bending and changing, but the other 27 essays are also very important, and they come at it from many different directions. But the reason I mention it is the second place winner, Dr. Pim Van Lommel, at the end of his essay, he's talking about the one mind hypothesis. And he says there are 4 best resources at this time for the one mind hypothesis. and from a scientific perspective. One was our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. Another is the book One Mind by Dr. Larry Dossey. Another, the book Spiritual Science by Steve Taylor. And finally, a paper in the Journal of Consciousness Studies in 2018. It's by Bernardo Kastrup, and it's called The Universe in Consciousness. And I think between those four resources, people realize that this one mind argument is very strong. And there's a lot of evidence that we are part of that one mind, and yet we have free will. That's why I would say the best philosophical description for our position is evolutionary panentheism. And the evolutionary is the part about the free will, where quantum indeterminacy is the source of free will of sentient beings emerging in this universe. It's an exciting time to be witnessing the convergence of all this data from neuroscience, the hard problem of consciousness, from philosophy of mind and the binding problem, which is the apparent unity of consciousness within an individual, which is very difficult to explain from a materialist perspective of multiple neuronal populations. Then you've got all the evidence for non-local consciousness out of parapsychology. Telepathy, for example, more than 35% of identical twins have powerful telepathic experiences. Just read Guy Leon Playfair's book, Twin Telepathy, and you'll realize. And of course, remote viewing, one of the most proven fields in the history of parapsychology, is all about this one mind, this non-local consciousness that we share.
Yeah, Martin?
Yeah, Eben, do you think that your experience changed also your daily life? How you run your life?
I would say everything changed, because it really changed my whole perspective of myself, how I relate to the universe, and also how I relate to others. Because previously, I harbored that conventional materialist perspective, which is very damaging and toxic. In materialism, we're all separate beings. And in fact, with a materialism that grew up in the age of Darwinian evolution, we're competing, for resources in a very limited form. And that's just not the deeper reality. The deeper reality is that we're all connected through this mental space, this heart consciousness, and that we're all in this together, and that we're really here to help each other, not to compete and kind of drive each other to extinction, but actually to fully support the well-being and thriving and success of each and every one of our fellow beings, because we can do that. This world, especially given the spiritual kind of energy of this world, allows for that kind of gifting.
And you think we don't have to worry for any material things, right?
Well, just in terms of getting the spiritual work done, I mean, to help other people, you need material stuff to help other people. So in that sense, we do need to keep focused somewhat on material things. And
yeah, I mean, the whole rat race, make money, pay the house.
Well, I would say that's a very damaging and toxic kind of narcissistic, egocentric way of being, which is the way of the past. And it's a way, I would say it was leading our world to destruction. But I'm very optimistic about the future of this world, but that optimism is completely based in recognizing that there is a paradigm shift in science and a world revolution going on in terms of idealism and the primacy of mind over matter. And that is what is going to change this world. And that is the revolution we're talking about. And ultimately, it will make the world a far more peaceful and harmonious place. But it has to do with focusing on the higher good for all involved. And that's where I think that the near-death experiences have a beautiful lesson on this. This is the way to live. And that's what so many people who've had a near-death experience recognize. And if they'd spent most of their life as that competing narcissistic, Darwinian mindset, they've been busy trying to grab all the biggest toys for themselves their whole life, which is not the purpose of our existence. The purpose of our existence is to learn much more about our relationship with the universe, which has to do with acknowledging this one mind that we are all part of, that we're all truly in this together. And I think that will change the world.
Yeah, great. Very, very great, Eben. I have another question. I think it's very important.
Mhm.
In the afterlife, do we found salvation within ourselves, or are we dependent on something else, as Bible fundamentalists believe? Yeah, do we found salvation in ourselves in afterlife?
Yes, I would say the answer to that is yes. It does involve multiple lifetimes, I believe. I don't think one can get to that kind of perfection of oneness with the divine in one incarnation, but that's what this is all about, is this growth and understanding is a process that we all go through, and it's contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. For me, that whole concept is very well reflected in Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's book, The Phenomenon of Man, back in the mid-20th century. As a French Jesuit priest, he had a spiritual background. He was also a paleontologist, so a scientist with thinking on billion-year timescales. And he recognized that there was an evolution going on this planet or in this universe, but that it was much grander than just Darwinian evolution on planet Earth, and that it was all of consciousness that was going through the process of transformation and evolution. And I think that is what is actually happening. And we're each contributing to that process as sentient beings, learning about our own relationship to the universe. But ultimately, that paints a picture of the kind of bigger kind of structure and meaning and purpose of that one mind and its existence.
Thank you even for that answer.
The cat is coming there.
Yeah,
Behind you, even.
Is this a cat or a dog?
No, it's a dog. It's a
It's a dog.
Pomeranian.
Oh, it's a dog.
Like it's gonna jump. There.
I love dogs. I love dogs.
That's my visiting professor. He coaches me whenever I'm off target.
Great. Yeah.
What is the title in Germany of the book?
Blick in die Ewigkeit, glaube ich.
Oh, yeah.
Blick in die Ewigkeit.
That's the
And
most famous book.
the original title is Proof of Heaven.
Proof
Yeah.
of Heaven.
Right.
Yeah, genau. Yeah.
And then in English, we have The Map of Heaven and then Living in a Mindful Universe. That's the third book. And that's by far the most important for understanding these kind of scientific and spiritual concepts and bringing it all together. So, and people can learn more if they go to ebenalexander.com. That's EBEN Alexander.com. Go to sacredacoustics.com to learn more about the meditation. Remember that there is a new 10th anniversary edition of the book Proof of Heaven that's recently come out with 36 additional pages in it. But that Living in a Mindful Universe is really the best way forward as a book to put all this in perspective. And then also don't miss out on Inner Sanctum Center, INNER sanctumcenter.com. That's another website that Karen and I run. It's got multiple options for engagement, a monthly set of seminars we do. There's a mental health practitioner healing course in there that we did with Dr. Anna Houston. And there also are a set of interviews we did during the pandemic every 2 weeks for 2 years or more, interviews with other thought leaders around the world in consciousness studies, other experiencers, and those interviews are all available for free at that innersanctumcenter.com.
You read also the old famous books like Elisabeth Kübler-Ross or Raymond Moody?
Yes, absolutely.
Did you read it?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I wrote the foreword for the 40th anniversary edition of Raymond Moody, Life After Life. So, and Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, you know, as I tell the story in Proof of Heaven, I was reading her book of Life After Death. On page 28, it shocked me. That was the giant moment in Proof of Heaven where I recognized the reality of my journey was thanks to Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. So I'm very, very grateful to the work that's been done by, you know, my predecessors. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, Raymond Moody has become a very close friend of ours. Thank God he's still very active, and he's a beautiful sounding board for all these kind of things. But yeah, I love a lot of those classic works, and they've been very important, you know, to help me understand my journey much more fully.
Now I have my question. Eben, what do you say to people who thinks that we come to an hell if we don't believe in, example, Christianity?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I would just say that from my perspective, there is no such thing as an eternal hell. That would make zero sense. And our souls
Mm,
come back again and again in a process of refinement, of getting closer to that oneness with the divine. And that it's not, you know, it's all about love. I mean, that's what I think most religions try and teach us. Most of them have a golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated. And that's really the deepest and most profound lesson of near-death experiences. And essentially, I think that's where, as I said before, my friend Robert Kopp's book, Essence of Religions, he compares the Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, as well as Buddhism and Hinduism, with near-death experiences as the gold standard. And in that book, he kind of highlights where most of them could do a better job of getting closer to the truth. But the truth is really all about love and kindness and compassion. That's what we need to
mm,
remember for self and for others, and to really take care of the least, the last, and the lost, the refugees. We really need to do a better job of taking care of all of our fellow beings.
mm.
Sorry, I heard that what we call hell in the Bible is something also between life here and life and beyond, that we cannot leave the material world. Also that we are still in hell before we get into heaven. That that we still cannot leave the money and the whatever.
Well, I think some people might get stuck. In other words, if somebody is such a hardcore materialist and their body dies, especially if it's all very sudden, um, they might get very confused about where they are and what's going on. And of course, in my own story, there is the fact that I passed through that kind of purgatory, the earthworm's eye view, where it all started. And initially, I thought that earthworm's eye view was the best consciousness my brain could muster while it was soaking in pus, and that I was witnessing the much clearer consciousness that was the pure form of consciousness. But over time, and especially after I read more about near-death experiences, I realized that that kind of purgatory state that I experienced as the earthworm's eye view might be like the bardos of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. In other words, it might be a territory that's not uncommon to encounter. And in fact, Robert Monroe, who did a lot of work with out-of-body experiences and also with binaural beat brainwave entrainment, thought that there were belief territories in those spiritual realms where people could get stuck. So a materialist would be especially prone to getting stuck there because they didn't really understand what was going on. And they realized they were still, aware, and yet they thought that things had happened that should make them dead. So a very, very confusing set of circumstances. But I think that kind of thing does happen. So that's where having some clarity around all this can do you so much good. And living your whole life, say meditating every day, realizing how much your spiritual growth depends on helping others and, being there, doing the highest and best good for other sentient beings involved in this one mind. That's a very different attitude from, the materialist, narcissistic, grab every toy you can before you die. But this is the way the world works. This is the way the scientific investigation of these experiences leads us into the much broader view that we're part of this one mind and we come back again and again to get it right. There is a forgetting that's applied at certain stages, so we can't always bring knowledge from the other side back here. But in general, the more we can explore consciousness and get to know our higher soul and that primordial mind in this life, I think that helps us when it comes time to leave this world, so that it's not confusing at all, that we know exactly what's going on because we're used to it, because we've cultivated it through our study and through our dreams space and through meditation and what have you. And we've lived that life of generating lots of love and kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance for others. So we really have nothing to fear when that time of death comes.
That's
because
what
it's
I mean.
actually a liberation from the cage. It's a liberation from the shackles of the body and brain.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That the hell is not something like being in the fire. It's something like the view back onto your life, and then you feel all the fear of other people when you shout the children or whatever. that you feel the crying of other people, whatever. That maybe is the hell before you get into life after death.
Right. Well, I think there's still a lot to be learned about this, but to me, the one thing that makes no sense would be eternal hell and damnation for any
Yeah,
soul.
you're
Yeah,
right.
I mean, that just makes
You're right.
completely no sense at all, period.
Yeah.
End of story.
especially if you don't believe in Christ.
Well, that is a really serious problem. This kind of get out of jail free card mentality around, that some people think, oh, if I just believe in Christ, then that's enough. And then I can do anything I want. Well, that's not true at all. We're responsible for our actions. And if we mistreat others, we're mistreating ourselves. And there's no sugarcoating that by pretending that we get an easy pathway out if we just claim to believe in something. We must follow in those footsteps and do as Christ did. That is the answer to the question, not just kind of claiming to believe.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
If you think that 50% of the human beings are never heard about the Bible, so they cannot be also come into the hell, all of them, just because they are Hindus or Buddhists or Muslims.
Well, the good news is we don't have to have any 2,000-year-old scripture to tell us which way this is all going. Everything that I'm saying, everything that is in our books, Proof of Heaven, Map of Heaven, and especially Living in a Mindful Universe, is really about a secular, scientifically based spirituality that links us all together and that brings love and kindness and compassion into the equation and does it in a way that is something we can study through scientific methodology. And that's where it's all headed. That's why that BigelowInstitute.org set of papers is so important. Living in a Mindful Universe, all these books aiming to describe the one mind and how we're all in this together. Those are all important steps forward in this scientific revolution.
So you don't be anymore in fear of dying one day in 10,
no,
20
dying
years.
is an adventure. It's actually being released from the prison. So it'll be wonderful when that moment comes. I feel like I still got many things that I should do in this lifetime, in this body before I leave. But I'm not afraid of that moment when it comes. I know it'll be an extraordinary adventure. And all the evidence points that way. So you can forget the bleak and paltry fiction of materialist scientists and recognize that they've been too lazy to read any of those BigelowInstitute.org papers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eben, the reason why I make the association with Martin, I was a child that remember on a life before my life, on a being before my life. I remember that I was in a darkness, in a nothing, but I could think like today, and there was peace, and I was very, very happy. That's the reason why why I am a spiritual person all my life, and it's I saw something like you, and I think there is more than a material world. I think it makes no sense without the understanding that we are all one and that there is a world soul. Do you know the meaning of world soul?
Yes, I've certainly heard that term used before, and I believe that's what I would often call higher soul. And world soul is really where it all comes together. But there's nothing we own about our quote higher soul. It's where we dovetail into our fellow souls. And I would think the world soul is a beautiful kind of expression of that idea.
Yeah, and the Hindus has Brahman, Atman. You know the terms?
Absolutely. In
Brahman,
fact, I love the fact that I'm a big fan of quantum physics and following quantum physics. And I know Erwin Schrödinger, often he loved the he said that his second equation, of course, anybody who knows quantum physics knows about Schrodinger's equation, but I love how Schrodinger said his second equation was Atman equals Brahman.
Yeah.
And so he was right on target, that the mind, the individual mind overlaps the oversoul and mind of the universe. Atman equals Brahman. And even Schrodinger even named one of his dogs Atman.
Yeah. Eben, do you like our idea of association for pantheism?
Absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, the residual effect of religions in our modern world, a lot of people gain spiritual strength from religion, and that's wonderful when it happens. But whenever an ideology, a religious teacher, leader, what have you, starts getting exclusive and starts talking about warfare and violence and conflict between religious members, they've obviously completely lost their way and should be completely discarded without fail. This is all about love and kindness, compassion that is all inclusive of all of our fellow beings. So from that perspective, I think religions can help support the spiritual growth of their members, but that never will involve ideological senses of conflict, getting into politics. I mean, that's the worst thing in the world, to throw politics and religion together. I mean, politics is such a cesspool of activity these days, and to have religion kind of thrown in there, it's a horrible mix. But this is real. That's why I say our approach does not depend on 2,000-year-old scripture. Every bit of this kind of knowing of the oneness of mind, the binding force of love, can be determined from modern writings of modern experiences, what people go through, and people can do their own meditating and centering prayer to make their own connection with that higher soul and that God force. This is where sacred acoustics can be very powerful for many. So if you don't already have a good, powerful tool for deep transcendental meditation, I would suggest try out Sacred Acoustics. Go to sacredacoustics.com. You'll learn a lot more by exploring that site.
Yeah.
For us, every religion is a kind of piece of a puzzle. Everyone is a piece of the whole one, but not the complete truth.
Right. Well, that's where I think that book, Essence of Religions, Bob Kopp's, is quite useful, because he really delineates all those features of the various religions and then compares them head to head with near-death experiences. So it's a very valuable kind of comparison and assessment.
Yeah. What I want to say, the association is the middle point of my life, and I saw the people like this idea, and the people want this association. Pantheism is an option that brings people together. It's very a great thing. We had last year we had a big summer festival, and the people was so happy, and I'm very
beautiful. I think you're right on target. That is an essential part of moving forward in this world, is having religions come together and recognize that they're far more similar than they are different, and that we need to work on a more kind of common interfaith approach to our understanding that is completely tolerant of other belief systems and focuses really on the love, kindness, compassion, mercy, and acceptance.
Maybe we come to the end, and even you would like to say some last words to our viewers?
Right. Well, I think the biggest message from all of this discussion, this kind of paradigm shift in science, moving from materialism to idealism and panentheism, is really that it's all very hopeful and optimistic for humans and for humanity, because it really will gently nudge all of us much more towards a loving, peaceful, and cooperative, collaborative approach to living our lives. And that cannot help but make this world a far better place for all involved. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for getting this out to the world. Appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Good talking with you.
We thank you. You are a nice person. I like you, and it was very nice to meet you here. It was very great. You you have bring great informations to our conversation, interview, and thank you, very, very thank you.
We will do some advertisement.
Thank you
for your
very
book.
much.
Yeah.
Very good talking with you both. I've enjoyed it. We'll
Yeah,
talk again
and
soon.
and we see us in the next time. Yeah.
All right, sounds
Maybe
great.
with
We'll see you
Neil.
then.
Okay.
Tschüss.
All right.
Bye.
All right.
Tschüss.
Thanks. Bye-bye.